Alright, so good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the GA 108 or the Property Surveying. So today we will be discussing all about the topic 1 of this course, which is all about introduction to property laws and review of surveying concepts. And this will be for the authors and contributors of this material, and here is for the copyright notice. For this presentation, we have 4 parts. And the part 1 will be all about the review of surveying concepts. The part 2 is all about the definition of the property survey and its related terms. Part 3 is all about property surveying and the property surveying general methodology. And the last part, which is the part 4, is all about the introduction to property laws and other existing related laws about property. So after this lecture or this topic, the discussion of this topic, you are these are not expected outputs from you. You, the student, must have first defined the different terms related to surveying. Second is explain the general methodology of the property surveying. Next is the recall the property laws and other existing related laws about property and ownership. And lastly is the explain the concepts and principles of property surveys and its applications. So without further ado, let's start with the part 1, which is all about the review of the surveying concept. So in this part, more on review lang ta sa inyong GE 101, all about the surveying concepts. So basically, the field operations performed by a surveyor or a geodetic engineer involves linear and angular measurements. So kung mag-measure ta, if mag-perform tag field activities, we need these 2 measurements, the linear one and the angular. And we can solve different measurements, and its relationship using the application of mathematics, specifically in geometry and trigonometry. And the spatial information knowledge, such as the location of x and y coordinates, latitude and longitude. And then the surveyor converts these measurements to horizontal and vertical relationships through mathematical formulas. And from out of that, we can produce maps, plans, and other engineering related projects. And we can also produce a geographical information system, or we can visualize and analyze through GIS and land information system. Talking about linear and angular measurements, the points on the ground which is atong usually gina-adapt or atong usually ginakuha are related to other points or related to each other through the horizontal distance and horizontal angle or direction. So makalculate na to ang isa ka point which is known, and we want to know the points or the x and y of that point. We will be having the relationship between the horizontal distance and the horizontal angle. So na kay distance and na po kay angle. Then, measuring distances alone in surveying does not establish the location of an object. So we all know that. Kung kulang ang ato ang data, so dili kita makakuha og another location, which is ang ato ang gusto mahibaw-an. And as a geodetic engineer or as a surveyor, in locating an object, dapat naka three-dimensional aspects siya. So naa siya X, Y, and Z. And to get that or to accomplish that one, we need these 3 data, which is the horizontal length or the distance between the 2 points, the difference in height or the difference in elevation, and the angular or the direction aspect of that 2 points. So let's talk about the angle. Let's recall. The angle is defined as the difference in direction between 2 convergent lines. So kung naay nag-converge nga duha ka line, ang iyang difference ana niya is what we call angle. So it is usually measured using angular units. So there are 3 kinds of angles, we have horizontal angle, vertical angle, and the zenith angle. So horizontal angle is performed by directions of two objects in a horizontal plane. So unsa man ang horizontal plane? So if you are going to have a perspective, no, above na murag atong hunaon nga ato ang mata is nasa ibabaw nato, no. So the plane nga ma-establish na niya is what we call the horizontal plane. So ang duha ka lines pag mag-converge dito sa horizontal plane, ang iyang difference is what we call horizontal angle. And for vertical angle is formed by two intersecting lines in a vertical plane. So one of these lines is horizontal. So ato na pong balhin atong perspective sa side nato. So kung nakay try nato og try nato. Okay. No, so if ever vertical angle is if for example naa ka diri nagtindog, no, then nata atong eyes diri atong ibot ang atong perspective. So, eyes taraw na siya. So ang kaninga plane is ang vertical plane. Pag mo tan-aw taan niyo diri nga part atong perspective, so natay makita nga horizontal plane. So circle man gyapon kay round ba ng earth, no. So isa ka horizontal, isa ka vertical, then ang ilahang angle na is a vertical angle. The next is the zenith angle, is the complementary angle to the vertical angle. So when we say complementary, dapat 90 degrees, no? And is formed by two intersecting lines in a vertical plane. One of these lines directed toward the zenith, no? When we say zenith is the point directly above kung asa ka karon, no? For example, pointing above. Based na sa ato ang discussion sa astronomy nga introduction, which is nasa yung G1. So visualize, so ingani siya. So mao ni siya si horizontal plane. So naadira si horizontal plane, ang angle na naadira within niya is the horizontal angle. Then mao ni siya si vertical. So ang vertical angle is from the horizontal padulong sa isa ka line na nag-converge. So this is vertical angle. And si zenith is from the line of zenith padulong sa isa ka line na nag-converge. So tawagan na niya is zenith angle. So there are two types of angular measurements. We have horizontal angular and vertical angulars. So horizontal angular measurements are made between survey lines to determine the angle between the lines. So pares atong gibuhat na ganina, no? Atong i-visualize na pag naay duha ka line na nag-converge sa horizontal plane, so ang iyahang difference is the horizontal angle, so as the vertical angle. So vertical angular measurements are measured to determine the slope of the survey lines from the horizontal plane or the level plane. So we have also interior angles, no? Interior angles are measured clockwise or counterclockwise between two adjacent lines on the inside of the closed polygon, and the exterior from the name itself, no, outside, no, and are measured clockwise or counterclockwise between two adjacent lines on the outside of the closed polygon. To visualize, so this is the interior angle. So if you have a polygon, angles ni sa sulod is interior and sa gawas is exterior. We have also this what we call deflection angles, no? Deflection angles it can be right or left, or deflection angles to the right or deflection angles to the left. So these are measured from the extension of the preceding course and ahead of line. It must be noted that the deflection is pwede siya mahimong right or left. So i-extend do nimo from the preceding at the example na nila. So mo ni siya. So mo ni imuhang station observe, for example, and this is your backside and this is your foresight. So deflection karon is from the preceding line padulong sa imong padulngan, no? So from the backside, mo ni siya ang line, i-extend lang nimo siya, then going to the next point which is the foresight. So ang kaning angle is what we call deflection angle. So it can be left or right, no? So pwede siya deflection to the right or deflection to the left. So in this example, deflection to the right siya. And for deflection to left, same rag gihapon, backside, station observed, and foresight. Then if we are going to extend this one, and mo ni siya ang line padulong sa imong next na station, then this angle is what we call deflection angle, but to the left na siya. So angles to the right are turned from the back line in a clockwise or right-hand direction to the ahead line. So na-visualize naman nato kaganina, no? And angles to the left are turned, no, from the back line in the counterclockwise or left-hand direction to the ahead line. Same sa ato ang figure kaganina. So to the right and to the left, kung asa ra yan the left direction, depende kung unsay ipangayo sa problem. So azimuth, no, let's recall what is an azimuth. No? Azimuth of the line on the ground is its horizontal angle measured from the meridian to the line. Meridian to the line daw siya. So going back sa inyong GE 101, if this is the horizontal plane and this is the base meridian or the Greenwich meridian, then imuhang kung asa ka nga meridian karon, let's say naa ka diri nga meridian. So azimuth angle is the horizontal angle measured from the meridian to the line. So diri padulong sa kaning line. So that is the azimuth. The azimuth gives the direction of the line with respect to the meridian, and it is usually measured in a clockwise direction, so clockwise, with respect to either north meridian or south meridian. But in the Philippines, we are referred in the south. And azimuth may have values between 0 to 360. Okay, since ang isa ka full rotation is 360 degrees. Next, bearing. No? Bearing of the line also gives the direction of the line with respect to the reference meridian. The bearing states whether the angle is measured from the north or south, and also whether the angle is measured toward east or west. No? Bearing may have the values between 0 to 90 degrees. No? So sa bearing, ang iharajud ng angle is narajud na siya sa 0 to 90. No? And naka-refer yapon siya sa north meridian or south meridian. But mag-matter lang siya kung going to the east ba siya or going to the west. Unlike sa azimuth, na isagid siya ka angle, no? Whether asa na butang imuhang meridian. As long as sulod lang siya sa 360. So, ingani siya, no? North, south, and east and west. No? If example kanino 54 degree. So, kani siya, example number 1. From north 54 degrees to the east. No. Number 2 is 26 north from the north meridian, 26 degrees daw padulong sa west. Then kani is south 47 degrees going to the east, and south 31 degrees going to the west. Next is let's recall what is traverse. Traverse is a succession of straight lines along or through the area to be surveyed. The directions and lengths of these lines are determined by measurements taken in the field. So, traverse is intahay mo na imuhang lot na i-survey. So, to determine the location of these corners, for example, mag-relocation survey mo. So, you need to have a traverse, no? What is the traverse sa may forma sa imo? Just like that. So, ang kani is known or since one imong station 1, dapat naka-tie ni siya sa known reference. Like for example, na diri imong ground control points, so dapat imuha pa na siyang kuhaan dito og value. Backside pa ka dito adi sir kamo padagan og traverse. So na siya, no? And the route of the traverse line can be adjusted for obstacles such as a rough or tempered terrain, swampy land, buildings, and areas of heavy traffic. So imo na siyang buhaton kung pintahay dili jud accessible, tuyukan jud na nimo ang isa ka area para makakuha ka og coordinates aning imong lot nga i-survey or imong i-relocate. So manay concept no behind the traverse, ano naa si traverse. So there are two kinds of traverse, which we have open traverse and closed traverse. Open traverse begin at a point of known position and ends at a station whose relative position is unknown. Open traverse, kintahay, lagyo na kayo ang area. So, para dili na kapoy, mubalik sa isa ka area or kintahay pila na ka kilometers ang inyong di-traverse, pwede na hindi na ka mubalik sa known niya. So, pwede ka magpadagan og traverse, padulong ana, padulong sa imong gusto padulngan. But considering the accuracy and standards of a traverse. So, open traverse, begin ka sa known position and mag-end ka sa unknown position. So, this type of traverse is frequently used for primarily surveys for highways, no? Mga route surveys and topographic surveys, ana. And closed traverse begins and ends, no? Si closed traverse magsugod sa known position and mag-end pud siya sa known position or at the same point, no, whose position is being known. Closed traverse kanang usually ginabuhat sa property surveys, no, or perimeter surveys of a tract of a land. For example, mo ni imong tract of land, so dapat naka-closed traverse ka. Mubalik yan pud ka dito sa kung asa ka nag-start sa imong point, no? So, muna siya ang closed traverse. So, the purpose of a traverse is, first, no, a traverse is currently the most common, pinaka-common siya nga pamaagi, of several possible methods for establishing a series of network of monuments with known positions in the ground. Usually, mo yung ginagamit pagka ng specifically no lagyo ng area, kilometers na ang distance. So, pinaka-common si traverse. Such monuments are referred to as horizontal control points, and collectively, they comprise the horizontal control of the project. So, kintahay, wala kay known control points doon sa imong i-survey na tract of land. So, you need to run a traverse, no? Na mas dool sa imong tract of land na gusto nimo i-survey. So we have also azimuth traverse, no? It is a measured clockwise either from the north or south end of a selected reference meridian to the line. So these angles may lie anywhere between 0 to 360 degrees. And it is used extensively in topographic and other surveys where a large number of details are to be located by angular and linear measurements from the traverse stations. So in computing a traverse, there are various other computations and adjustment required for a closed traverse. Example, a closed traverse. First is we need to determine the latitude and departures and the respected algebraic sums. So, DMD, DPD for nga concept. And calculating the total area of closure. Then, we need to balance the survey and determine the adjusted position of each traverse station. And then, you can compute now the area. And afterwards, if you compute the area, you can divide kung pilay gusto ninyo i-divide ang isa ka tract of land. So, I believe na na-discuss na ninyo sa inyong GE 101, no? Pwede na tamo deep in kayo. So, let's go to the latitudes and departures. Now, when we say latitudes, it is a projection into reference meridian or on a north-south line. Latitude, north to south. Sometimes, it is referred to as northings and southings. Its lines rather with northerly bearings are designed as being north and or the positive, no? Kung latitude above padulong siya sa taas, naka-north, then dapat naka-positive. Then padulong sa ubos, south, negative. So ingana ang latitude. Next is departures. Now, departures is a projection onto the reference parallel or an east to west line. Its lines with easterly bearings are designed as east or positive and west bearing are designated as west or negative. Kung padulong po kadri sa east, this is positive. And going to the right, west, left rather, negative. So, muna siya ang departures. So, the formula for getting the latitude and departure, so, let's say, latitude of the point AB. Example na kay A, padulong kang B. This is point A and this is point B. Kay line, i-connect mo siya. So, latitude na niya is distance. No? Distance between A and B, cosine B, angle. No? Angle. Same mo na siya. From the horizontal. Then departure of AB is the distance sine. No? Sine angle of line A. So to determine the linear area of closure, as to the definition, it is usually a short line of a known length and direction connecting the initial and final station of the traverse. So may tabo ni sa linear area of closure, like for example, mag-traverse ka. Yan. Tungkol sa error, di na siya magdikit. No? Di na siya napa na siya somewhat distance na nakagamay. So that is a linear area of closure. Short line, unknown length. No? Pakakabalo kung pila iyang distance ana and also iyang direction. Tungod kay sa imuhang pag-survey, nibalik na ka, no? Nibalik ka sa point, pero pag imuhang i-plot, hindi sila mag-abot. Na-adjust na siya error tungod sa the different kinds of errors, random errors, systematic errors, and so on. So that's a linear error of closure. So it is approximately determined by plotting the traverse to scale, or more exactly by computing the hypotenuse of the right triangle whose sides are the closure in latitude and closure in departure respectively. No, so imo siyang i-calculate, no? Imo siyang i-compute kung pilay distance na niya. Example ana. No? Kinaman dyan na difference in departures and difference in latitude. So ang katong line, imo to siyang i-calculate pilay bilin, i-minus nimo sa tinuod niya coordinates. So nakay mabilin nga difference in latitude and difference in departure. And imo siyang kuha og angle using tangent, no? Tangent inverse of the difference in latitude and departure. So you can calculate the angle of the linear area of closure. So this is the formula. No? Like is or linear area of closure is equals to distance formula of the difference in latitude and departure. And you can calculate those the angle of the LEC by using this formula. Tangent, negative for the difference of the departure over the difference in latitude. And relative error or the relative precision. So it is just a ratio of the linear area of closure over the perimeter or the distance, total perimeter of a traverse. So linear area of closure over the perimeter. And when adjusting a traverse, there are many methods that we can utilize. We have a compass rule and a transit rule. Now, compass rule or the Bowditch rule, the correction to be applied to the latitude or departure or any of the curves is equal to the total closure in latitude or departure multiplied by the ratio of the length of the course to the total length or perimeter of a traverse. So I will not going to deep in with this part no kay i-discuss ni siya sa inyong I guess sa inyong geodetic computations and adjustment. Ito na masulod si compass rule and si transit rule. So, introduction na lang po taan ni and na introduce na po niya sa inyong GN 101 before. Another method is the transit rule. The correction to be applied to the latitude or departure of any course is equal to the latitude or departure of the course multiplied with the ratio of the total closure in latitude to the arithmetical sum, no, of all the latitudes of the traverse. Si compass rule, ano lang siya, length yung basihan, and si transit is ang arithmetical sum of the latitude or departure. Right, so much for the part 1, no? So part 1 is more on introduction and review of the concepts na inyuhang na learn before sa inyuhang surveying subject. So important to siya for us to be recall or familiar kay mobalik ta adto nga mga terms and processes, specifically sa pag-calculate sa area sa tract of land, no? Calculating the traverse, in that data computations, and many more. So let's go to the part 2 of this material, no? Which is all about the definition of property surveying and its related terms. So as per introduction, no, sa part 2, so we all know na kung mupalit ka og yuta or mubaligya ka or mo sell ka og property, it is always advisable to know the necessary informations related to the property. Of course, no, kung naimo hanyag sa imuha nga, sir, I have this kind of tract of land and ako ni ibaligya sa imuha. So before you na siya paliton, you need to know all the necessary informations related to nga yuta or a property, no, such as the deed restrictions, no, or mga documentary related aspect, no, like for example na ba siya title, no, kung sa bagigunitan nga documents ay isa ka seller, no? Building locations, kung naana ba'y mga sa isa ka specific tract of land, no, naana ba'y mga houses diyan nakabutang, naana ba'y mga other establishments nga nakabutang, and we need to determine those location kay basin nilapas na to siya sa tract of land. Easements, no, kung kani ba nga tract of land naabay kalsada nga kaagihan padulong pagawas, no? And other pertinent setback requirements. So this information is important because it can identify and determine whether or not the property being sold or bought is worth the value of being paid or asked for. So nakay sa tract of land nga gihanyag sa imong nga ibaligya, mo suffice na ba tong value nga iyang ipangayo for this specific land? Kani ba nga yuta is good for bagid siya for 1 million, which is mo gihanyag sa imuha, no? So there's a lot of research you have to do before di mo siya mahibaw-an or ma-learn ang history and other documents ani nga yuta when you're thinking or purchasing an investment as big as a home or land. So usually mo ni ang mahitabo, no, nga scenario sa atoa mga tao labi na sa kaning mga kuan, kaning mga area nga kanang dili urbanized, no. So naay waligya sa ilang lote tungod kay para gusto lang naay mapuy-an, no, lagi mahal pero wala siya kabalo nga ang katudang specific tract of land is dili kompleto papel. Mabot ang panahon na you need to register those lands, ikaw na ang magproblema, no? Ikaw na ang magproblema sa pagpatitulo, no? Which is mas dako imuhang mabayaran kung magka-problema, no? So I have this example, no, sa ako ang uncle, no, nga nakabay siya property tapat sa kalsada, first lot siya, 800 square meter. Now niabot na ang time na gusto na niya ipatituluhan, no? So without knowing, after gi-research niya sa DENR or sa Senro, untitled man siya, wala din nakapangalan sa iya ang lote. So naka-apply, which is ika-third na siya nga person, supposedly like Sa iya man tong nanay, sa iyang mama. So, iyang mama, na igipalitan, like for example, mo ni si letter C, mo ni iyang mama. So, na siya gipalitan na si letter B. Tapos, si letter B, na siya gipalitan kang letter A, which is kaning si letter A pa ang nakarehistro sa or naka-apply sa sendro. No? So, taas na kayo ang proseso, mas nadaan siya kay ni protesta pa man, no? Nag-protest pa na i-protest ni si A na wala na siya nag-occupy ani nga land. No? So, taas na ang proseso and nagastuan na noon siya. So, it is really need no to muna siya importance or muna one way of example no nga when you buy a land dapat kasayod ka unsay history and kasayod ka unsay ang papers is clean ba siya, no? Updated ba ang iyang tax and many more. So this research also called as completing the due diligence. No? Due diligence kanang mga na ay mga conflict pa sa papers, sa yuta, and so on. Which is a real estate term. No? When we say due diligence, it is a real estate term. Essentially, it means that you know exactly what state the land or house you want to buy or sell is in, and that you'll be prepared for whatever happens. So, dapat andam ka kay specifically no kung ang imuhang location sa land is dapin og kalsada. And what if no naiplano si government na padak-an pa ang kalsada? So kung dili na titulado imong yuta or imong property and naka-public land pa siya kay wala pa nimo gi-applyan. So pagkuha na kung kintahay extend na ang widening sa isa ka lugar, no, maigo imong property, walay madawat nimo tungod kay public land pa man siya, considered pa siya as property sa state. So kung nakapangalan po na sa imuha, so naakay kung if ever mahitabo mang galing na siya, naakay compensation gyapon nga madawat gikan sa government. Mo lagi barato ra gihapon, no? Pero at least na kay madawat compared sa wala. And obtaining the needed information about property is not difficult. There are a lot of surveys that can be utilized to acquire this data. However, the best type of survey that you can use for this purpose is what we call property survey. All surveys na i-conduct regarding sa tract of land, sa kalote, parcel, and many more. Fencing, relocation survey, boundary survey, subdivision survey, of a tract of a property. Under na siya sa property survey. So a property survey begins with defining the boundaries of a plot of land. This clarifies the size of the property and where the land begins and ends. So usually kung nakaisa ka specific tract of land, no, and nawala ning isa ka muhon or let's say duha ka muhon, so kinahanglan na siya pangitaon or ato siyang i-relocate ang kanang boundary. So boundary surveys ang tawag na niya. So dapat kasayod ka kung asa nag-start, asa ang corner 1 ana niya, corner 2, corner 3, and so on. Unsay forma sa imong yuta, no? Kung nag-expect ka nga rectangle pero pag-abot na dito sa pag-plot sa imong yuta kay kung ano di ay nahimo na siyang pentagon, nya na pa siya anak gamay. Napaday siya points diri apa siya ka corner. No? So you need to clarify, no? And where the land begins and ends. Okay. So an updated property survey is also important for legal reasons, no? Especially kanang sa imong title. Kaya uban ang title kay ilang gamiton for loans, no? Legal purposes naman na. And sa imong title itself. So this is because municipal laws are not fixed, no? They change from time to time. So wala akong giingon nga di lang municipal laws pati na governmental laws, no? What if mo gusto sila expand or widening, no? So at least na kay gigunitan nga legal documents for your papers, which is output na siya sa property survey. Nakasite imong gipa seek to advice sa mga geodetic engineers, no, to determine those boundaries. For example, no, example ani nga statement is kanang nahitabo karon na Mindanao Railway project no, sa Davao, which is nag-start sa Davao. So pag determine nila sa kung asa paagihon ang train, no. So daghay nga ligsan nga parcels of lands. So out from that, i-compensate to sila, no? Compensate sila sa gobyerno. Now, kung wala kay gigunitan nga legal documents from that, walay compensation yung matag sa imo. No? So, from time to time, we don't know, no, man ay mga changes sa laws and ordinances sa specific municipality, barangay, provincial, or maybe in a national coverage. So, another example of this is the property might have a shed or a fence, no, that was well within the boundaries years ago. But after unjetted municipal order, it now encroaches into the neighbor's property or too close to the public street. So, mo ni siya ang pinakasaklap, no? Kung mo-encroach na ang imuhang property sa isa ka property. Example, ang imong nasayran ka ni imuhang property, no? Now, kay pagpa-relocate sa imuhang adjoining lots, is ni-encroach na ka, no? Sa lain nga, like for example, nang lapas na ka sa other na property. So, mo ni siya ang mo ni ang ginalikaya nato. Mo nang naata as a geodetic engineer to settle these kind of problems. Ato ang i-determine kung asa ang yun ang tinuod na boundary sa survey or sa property. So, a new survey will give you a confidence, no, that the property complies with the current local regulations. Kung katong para sa ganina, no, kung mag-change ang boundaries tungod sa undulated municipal border. Okay, even now, andun karon ang boundaries between municipalities is na pagyapon na siya conflict, no? Like for example sa Agusan del Sur and Davao de Oro na mga boundary, so napagyapon na conflict andun karon kung si each municipality or each province na sila kaugalingon nga boundary, no, established boundaries. So kung atuan na siyang i-overlay na to ang boundary nga gikan sa let's say Caraga and boundary gikan sa Davao de Oro, aya po na yung mga encroachment na may tamo. So from time to time mag-change na siya, no, tungod kay antod karon dili pa gyapon mag-settle ang border sa municipalities. So manang andam ta permitting. So a new survey will give you the confidence that the property complies with the current local regulations like zoning. Dapat ang imuhang lote is nasa residential jud siya, ang commercial is commercial. It can also highlight any potential discrepancies or boundary infringements. This can help you avoid any misunderstandings in the future with neighbors or the city municipal ordinances. A property survey can identify and determine the location of all the buildings and infrastructure within the property area with respect to deed of restrictions, record easement lines, boundaries, and other pertinent municipal setbacks and requirements. So, dapat mo comply ta sa municipal ordinances na gi-impose sa specific location. So it depicts all relevant building information such as fences, easements, kung asan mo kung naabay agihanan, ang imong isa ka property nga nagsunod sa imong which is imong adjoining property owner. Right of way to the other improvements plans for the property. So si property survey is useful siya, no, na mo solve of discrepancies that are related to any encroachments within the state before buying or selling the property. So mo ni siya ang pinaka-goal. Mupalit kag yuta, dapat settle ang boundary, settle ang discrepancies, kung naman gani conflicts ang land dapat ma-settle, which is important in determining the current status of any structural location and its due rights. So, si property survey, muna siya ang act on the solving the discrepancies of the properties or a state. And kani si property survey can be carried out or can be executed by the professional geodetic engineer or surveyor, which is diri nata musulod as geodetic engineers. To examine the condition and structures of a property. So, ana. Then, why property survey is important? Anong importante man si property survey nga execute? First, location of boundary lines and property lines. So one of the most common reasons a landowner seeks the assistance of the licensed surveyor is the location of the boundary lines. Mao jud ang pinaka pinaka goal sa isa ka client anong moduol siya og geodetic engineer. Nang moduol siya isa ka geodetic engineer to determine the exact location of the boundary lines or the boundary of the specific tract of land. So these legal boundaries of occupancy or possession are critical pieces of information to have before you build a fence, improve roofing, or pave your driveway. Siyempre, kung wala nimo naibawaan kung asa ang imong boundary, tapos magpabuhat ka og agihanan, tapos nigawas na din siya sa imong boundary, so that's a big problem. And all too often, the survey shows that you and your neighbors were operating under wrong assumption. Usually, morning may tabo, tudlo-tudlo lang, dili mo seek o advice or dili mo seek sa geodetic engineers nga services. Tudlo-tudlo hangtod nga maabot ang panahon, mag-settle lang may slag, wala man ay problema kay friends raman ang silingan, kaila raman ang silingan. Sa pagkakaroon, what if maabot ang panahon nga musulod na ang mga anak or mga kaapuhan so hindi na musugot na walay legal paper. So wrong assumption bisag ang inyong gi-assume na boundary is dili to siya mao ang boundary nga tinuod. So problema na noon. Usually mo ni may tabo sa society. I have one example during sa na client nako before na ang tapad niya adjoining lot is iharang igsuon iyang igsuon lagi tungod kay igsuon raman wala nagpa-survey wala nagpabutang kuhon or na papers ay papers approved sa DNR approved na sila titulo. Until such time niabot na namatay ang katong duha ka magsuon, ang anak na karon misulod. Ang ilang giasyon nga boundary is kani MOA gibilin sa ilang ginikanan o daw ni siya boundary. But after the survey based sa technical description sa DNR and sa title, niabot sa point na ang boundary na dapat nila is dili kani, which is nisibong pa siya gamay diriha. Nisibong pa diriha. So, mo ni ang tinuod na boundary lines, pero mo ni ilang giila. So, nisamok na. So, naitabo, ano dahil mo ingon niya, tinuod ba ka na inyong pag-survey, sakto ba ka na inyong pag-survey. So, geodetic engineers, pag once mga geodetic engineer ka, capable na dyan ka to do this job, to determine the boundaries. Siyempre, mag-refer, magyapon ka sa approved technical description sa DNR and the title itself. So, moto siya, isettle sila kay ang isa ka rason kay kung kanilang assumption yung mo nilang boundary, dili magtunga, dili mo equal ang area aning isa to area sa isa. So, pag diri ang boundary lines, tunga gid sila, which is mamugid po sakto. Isa ka tract of land, i-subdivide na nimo sa duha ka magsuon, dapat equal gid na sila. So, nga na. And before you have that fence erected, you want to make sure it will be built on your own property, not on the neighbor's property. Mao po ni isa ka problema, no? Mag-fence bisag wala pa na-determine as ang boundary. Tapos pag mag-encroach, masuko, no? Kay mao gid daw kuno na iyang boundary. So that's a common conflict, no? Common problem na ma-encounter when you are executing or you are practicing your profession. Makatubang giningan na klaseng tao. And the boundary line certification will also tell you whether the legal description of your paper is accurate. So, mo na naakay, makita ninyo sa sketch plan, kung isa na nakita sa inyong sketch plan. Nagid na sa tumoy no certification, no? This certifies that all the boundaries, all the technical description are true and correct based on the description of the property provided by the DENR or by the ROD. Siyempre, di man ito magbase sa ato ang output. So next importance of the property survey is the undisclosed rights and easements. So you may own your new home and its surrounding land, but someone else might have a right to use portion of your property. A survey will show no physical evidence the right of others to use their property for access, parking, utilities, and other situations. No, for example, this is a lot, no? And inyong adjoining lot. And naadriya ang national highway or highway. Now, sa imuhang technical description is kani mo ni imuhang lote, mo ni ang sa pikas is mo ni lote. Pero ang problema karon is kung saon pag-agi aning property A, mo ni property B, mo ni siya ang highway. Kung saon karon pag-agi ni property A na maka-access siya og road sa highway. So, although mo ni imuhang technical description, it is obliged or it is required in the law that you need to give, an easement, si B muhatag siya og easement kang A para makaagi si A, maka-access sa road na nakabutang anak sa imong property. Kaya syempre, usaon man pag-agi ni A, mag-helicopter siya padulong sa pikas or mabutang siya og kuan, overpass, no? So dili man siya pwede. So you need to give access to A, property A, bisag ikaw mo ni all track, mo ni track of land. No? So ang tawag aning si A nga property is what we call dominant state. Siya ang muagi in this part, dominant state. And ang katong naghatag, which is si B, siya si Servian. Servian state. So, kinahanglan mo, hatag siya easement, no? Agihan niya na dapat. So if your property blocks your neighbor's access to the road, for example, there are maybe an old agreement called an easement that gives your neighbor the right to walk across your property or access the main street. This information should be in public record. Dili pwede nga sabot-sabot lang ninyo. Dapat naka-public record. Notaryado, para butang, no, siya sa imuhang technical description sa inyo. So, na siya. And a property will show the conditions imposed by law that are reflected in your property's title report and other agreements. So, dapat, kung naamoy agreement or easement, agihan dapat sila, dapat i-public record siya, ipa-survey din ng sa geodetic engineer para ma-indicate sa lot description ani property B. Butang dito nga na siya gibutang nga 2 meters nga easement para kang dominant state or city. So, that's why property survey is important. Next is identifying water features. Another importance of property survey. Typical survey reports visible or surface waters like ponds, rivers, creeks, streams, and lakes. Underground waters and wetlands are topics that are better covered by any professional inspections. So if you own a property that happens to be by the sea or by a river, you maintain your right of ownership of that land, which comprises the bank or a shore. So in this specific topic, so this applies to the properties near sa rivers, streams, and so on. So kung ang imong property dool siya sa river, sample mo na siya. So mo na yung technical description sa imuhang land. Technical description sa imong land. Pero we need to acknowledge this laws nga nag-dictate kung sa mga easements, easements sa agricultural areas, forest areas, and sa mga urban areas. For example, imong property is tapat sa river or creek, in the urban area, like for example, Metro Manila. So you need to have 3 meters easement. Sabot sa easement from this line sa river, mo set back ang 3 meters or mo butang ka direct easement of 3 meters. Let's say this is 3 meters, 3 meters. Do mo ni imuhang property of land, sulod siya sa 3 meters. Required ka ang mukatag og 3 meters na easement the river pag naka sa urban. And pag naapog ka sa agricultural area imuhang lote, so required ka mukatag og 20 meters. And 40 meters in the forested areas. O ni imuhang river tapos naka sa forest areas, 40 meters. That's according to PD 1067, Article 51. So next is undiscovered encroachments, gores, and gaps. It's another concerns of property survey. Makita nato ang importance niya. So these issues are part of the boundary line certification. Most surveys include a statement that, unless the surveys say otherwise, there are no discrepancies between the property boundaries of your property and the adjoining property. This is especially pertinent if your property is next to alleys, roads, highways, and streets. A property survey may be the only way to tell if a third party holds a claim to a part of a property because their improvements, such as garage, fence, and swimming pool, are on your land. So ang botros pasabot ani is the issue of the encroachments. For example, kanang wala gid mag-fence ka or magtukod kag isa ka structures without seeking the services of geodetic engineer. So there is a tendency that your property or your structures may be encroached to other properties, which is mayong na siyang dako nga problema. So another one is borderline structures and future improvements. If you and your neighbor wants to erect fence or wall along the property line, a survey can help, which is the property survey, determine where to build it. Kung asa mo ibutang, dapat sulod pod siya sa imuhang boundary. If you are sharing the cost of the structures, it can straddle your property line. If not, it needs to build solely on your property. Many residential platted lots have building restrictions known as setbacks, which prohibit building anything within a certain distance from the boundary lines. If you are thinking adding structural improvements in your future, a survey will help you. Property survey will help you determine if the property is right for both of the current and future plans. Labi na may sabot na dili dapat idikit kayo sa wall ang inyong balay. May nga mga undertakings. The surveyor will usually confirm the improvements have built in accordance to your property that exist at the time of the survey are not in violation with local codes, local authority ordinances, or other restrictions. Especially in kanang imong area is dool sa kanang airport. No? So na siya specific nga pila dapat ka level or pila ka story imong i-build kung naa ka sa within ka sa buffer zone sa airport. Eh syempre, hindi ka mapadako dito o hindi ka magpasaka na restrictions na nakabutang kay airport man siya. Ano yung mga mga airplanes. So, specification of a property, another importance of a property survey. It may seem impossible, but sometimes a house is built in a wrong lot. Naing-ani nga, tendency, no? A survey provides peace of mind by showing the exact location in the house you are buying. So, usually, mahitabo ni siya, ang gitawag na itong wrong lot number. Tahay mo ni tract of land. Labi na nagsunod ang mga property number or lot number. So, may tendency, class, na mag-change. No? Ang kani is 2315, 2316, 317, 2318. Muna siya ang iyang lot numbers. Pero si owner, expect siya ang iyang occupy is 23, for example, 2315 ni Primero, sunod 2316, kani kay 17, and kani is 2318. So 2317, nag-expect siya ang iyang lote, ang iyang lote is mo ni siya. I know sa technical descriptions and the legal aspect is mo ni ang lot 237, pero ang nahibawan sa owner is kani si 2315. So diri siya nag-occupy instead nga kani. So na tendency ana no mahitabo. No? But it is impossible. Pero impossible pero na po cases kini arouse ana. So, a property survey can verify if the physical features and services available are adequate for your purposes. Ma-check na karon ni ma-check na ni property surveyor or ni geodetic engineer. Siyempre, i-plot na niya kay ako nang i-relocate ang lot 2317. Okay, mo lagi daw iyang i-occupy. Pero pag plot karon tuwa sa pikas, no, kasilingan dahil niya. So, nga na nga tendency. So, munang important si property survey. Next is a survey shows the exact dimensions of the property's boundary lines and how much land is included within those lines. That's why si property survey is important. Let us define now what is a property surveyor. Kung sa'y ginambuhat ni property surveyor or ni geodetic engineer. So, a property surveyor takes precise measurement to identify the boundaries of the parcel of the land and prepare reports, maps, and plots that are used for construction, deeds, and other legal documents. Ang atuang output mo na siya ang gamiton for preparation or sa mga undertakings, no, legal or legal purposes or sa pagbutang sa titulo, deeds, or construction, as-built survey kung asa ibutang ang location sa isa ka i-construct na building. Mo nang critical na part ang i-undertake na to if you are going to choose, no, to be in that field, no, nga mag-survey ka. The property surveyor determines the precise location of roads, buildings, and other features that are used to determine many changes of the property line. restrictions on what may be built on the property or where new structures must be located, how large the structures may be, and the appropriate building depths or foundations. So, morning role no, ni property surveyor. Precise location of the different features in the earth. So let's go to the definition of terms. First is we have a practice of geodetic engineering. So this is according to the RA 8560 or the Geodetic Engineering Law Act rather. So when you say practice of geodetic engineering, the practice no, of geodetic engineering is a professional and organized act of gathering physical data or kanang atong makuha nato nga distance, measurements, angles, no, physical data na siya on the surface of the earth no, with the use of precision instruments. Mo nang kinahanglan pa na ay instrument like total stations, no, GNSS receivers, and many more. It is also the scientific and methodological processing of this data and present no, them on graphs, plans, maps, charts, and other documents. So, dili lang necessary nga pag geodetic engineers ka or geodetic engineering graduate ka, taman lang ka sa pag-gather sa data. So, our practice in geodetic engineering or our profession also includes no, after nimo siya i-gather ang data, you need to process it as accurate as possible and you're going to present them no, in a graphs, plans, or maps. So it shall embrace, no, but not limited to the following activities. So our profession, the practice of our profession is mo ni siya ng mga activities. Dili na siya limited ani, napay mas daghan. But according to RA 8560, mo ni siya ang nakasulat. So professional geodetic engineering services with the use of surveying and mapping equipment, no? Such as graduated rods, mga equipment, graduated rods, measuring tapes, transit, levels, theodolites, photometers or echo-sounders, electronic distance meters or measurements that includes so may example, total station, no? Global positioning system or GPS or GNSS receivers, stereo plotter, and other instruments that are used to determine the meets and bounds. So yung tag meets and bounds, ang boundary no, sa isang allocation of land. And the position of on the surface of the earth, the water depths, sulod na atay hydrography, underwater configuration, sulod yapon siya sa hydrography, ground elevation, topographic survey, gravity or the gravimetric survey, isostasy, crustal movements, and the size and shape of the earth. Dari mo sulod si geodesy. And other instruments used for construction, survey, and those instruments used to guide the installation of large industrial equipments and machineries. So, ang diri nga part sa machineries and industrial equipment is determination kung asa ang suitable na part for installing that equipment and machines. Another activities is the horizontal and vertical control surveys. It also includes political boundary surveys, land surveys to determine their meets and bounds and prepare the plans thereof for titling and other purposes. So dili mo sulod si property survey. Property survey. No, hindi klaro. Sorry guys. Yan. So, sunod po, there is a subdivision, consolidation, and consolidation subdivision of title properties. No. Subdivision, pag-subdivide. No. Subdivide sa isa ka-tract of land. So, tayo naka-tract, ano na siyang i-subdivide ka upat. Depende sa client. Consolidation subdivision. No. Example, nakaiduha ka tract of land, dapat pareha sila og pangalan nakatitulo. May tawo i-consolidate, sabot sa i-consolidate, itibuon sa siya, adisir na pud siya i-subdivide. Kapila ang kapila siya i-subdivide. So diri gyapon siya mosulod sa property surveys or property surveying. Submission of survey plans and subdivided consolidated and or consolidated subdivision title properties to the government agencies concerned such as DENR using the numbering system and projection prescribed by the government. So sulod gyapon siya sa property surveying. Another one is to prepare and make sketch, no? And lot and location of plans. Location plans. Sketch plan, location plans, vicinity maps. So trabaho na to na activity na sa geodetic engineering. Conduct of engineering surveys and other technical preparation of engineering surveys plans such as topographic survey, hydrographic survey, tidal profile, cross-section, construction, and boundary surveys. So, ato po na siyang activity. Next is parcellary surveys of land traversed by infrastructure projects and the preparation of subdivision plans. Subdivision gihapon. Next is conduct of gravimetric and photogrammetric survey and its technical preparation of survey plans. Usually ron si drone survey is ginahinay nila adapt for property surveys. Next is survey and mapping works such as preparation of geographic and or information system. So, ang ato ang mga data nga nag-gather sa ground, ato siyang i-input sa geographic information system for the analysis and preparation of plans and maps. Another activity is survey to determine and establish line, no? Establish line and grade for the construction of buildings and other structures and its attachments. So, diri na masulod si as-built survey. As-built. Sabot, atong i-locate kung asa ibutang ang columns, no? Or itukod ang kanang haligi sa isa ka building. As-built surveys. And construction of as-take and as-built surveys of infrastructures. So, kung akong giingon. Conduction of mineral and mining surveys. Like for example, i-determine asa nga coordinates, no? For example, ang role ng gid ni geodetic engineer sa isa ka mining company, for example, surface area, mining surface sa earth, dinaadiri ang ore nakaluton sa mining. So si geodetic survey as geodetic engineer ang determine sa location ani niya. Locations ani nga mga points which is na-locate ni si ore. And also maintaining the elevations, no? Bila usually nga volume nga makalot, many more. Then installation of machineries requiring the use of precision instruments, no? Ibutang ang mga machines i-install sa specific location. Engagement in the transfer of knowledge and technology of geodetic engineering into any institution of learning and provision of consultancy services in geodetic engineering. So ang kaninga part is sa academy siya, which is kung asa me na belong. Academy. R-D-N-M. Okay. So academy siya nga part. So let's define, no, the term geodetic engineer. According to RA 8560, Section 2, or the Geodetic Engineering Act, a geodetic engineer is a natural person who has been issued a certificate of registration by the Board of Geodetic Engineering and has taken oath of profession of geodetic engineers. Pag muintang geodetic engineer, kanang lisensyado sa Board of Geodetic Engineering or the PRC or the Philippine Regulatory Commission. Another definition of geodetic engineer is that's according to IIR of RA 9200. Geodetic engineer is a natural person, again, who has been issued a certificate of registration and identification card by the Board of Commission. Pag maintag commission, PRC na siya. So, according to DAO 2007-29, geodetic engineer shall refer to a natural person with professional expertise in the field of surveying and corresponding survey data presentation in the form of maps, plans, geospatial digital maps, and many more. Dapat na siya professional expertise, either in the government service or private practice, and has been issued a certificate of registration and identification card by the PRC, Board of Geodetic Engineering. Okay, nabalik ni siya si geodetic engineer. Tapos na natin i-discuss. So, next is how to become, no? Para sa man maingon na registered geodetic engineer ta. So, according to RA 8560, all persons desires to register as geodetic engineers and practice a profession must pass the licensure examination for the practice of geodetic engineering. At makapasar og licensure exam. And all applicants, no, for registration and admission of the practice of the geodetic engineer's profession shall require to take the pass the geodetic engineering licensure examination, or kanang gitawag natong GELA. Next, so let's talk about the licensure examination for geodetic engineers. So ang licensure examination for geodetic engineers para mahimo ang registered, refer to the written technical licensure examination given by the board and pagwintang board of geodetic engineering and administered by the commission or the PRC to measure the basic knowledge and technical competence of applicants for registration as geodetic engineers and entry to the practice of geodetic engineering. So this is the one way of evaluation, no, kung pwede na ba mo practice as geodetic engineers. Right, so when we say board, no, or definition of terms, board is the Board of Geodetic Engineering. And when we say commission, it's the Professional Regulatory Commission or Regulation Commission or PRC. So as of now, for the information of everybody, so this is the Board of Geodetic Engineers. So sila yung hatag o board exam sa geodetic engineers. We have our chairman, Engineer Epifanio Lopez, and the two members are Engineer Randolph Vicente and Engineer Concordio Zuniga. So sila ang gabuhat or sila yung muhatag o questions na answeran or i-take sa mga mo-take o geodetic engineering licensure examination. So for the scope of examination, so ato yung i-define since appeal siya sa definition of terms according to RA 8560. So ano yung mga subjects nga i-take, no, during the licensure examination. First is the laws, rules and regulations. No, parang klase sa laws. Public land laws, laws on property, laws on natural resources. So, dili mo sulod ang property survey. But anyway, naman may separate na subject na laws on property siya. No? Land registration laws, land reform laws, obligation and contracts, professional ethics, and ethical practice, rules and regulations governing land survey, other bisag unsa nga mga laws na pwede masulod sa geodetic engineering practice. Next is the mathematics, no? Sulod na po dira si algebra, solid geometry, analytic geometry, engineering economics, plane and spherical trigonometry, differential and integral calculus, and engineering mechanics. Sulod na dira si mathematics. Next subject is the theory and practice of surveying that involves property surveying. So, dili na masulod na ito ang subject. Isolated surveys, mineral and mining surveys, cadastral land surveying, astronomy, route survey, and earthworks. Hydrographic and topographic surveying, photogrammetry, GIS, remote sensing, dili na siya masulod ng mga topic. Engineering surveys and construction surveying. Next subject is geodesy. Geodesy alone. It involves geodetic surveying, geodetic astronomy, geodetic triangulations, leveling, gravity measurements, so ito in physical geodesy, least squares, geodetic computations and adjustment, GNSS, that involves knowledge on global navigation satellite system, physical geodesy, geometric geodesy, and satellite geodesy. Na inyong mga subject. Lastly is cartography that involves plotting and mapping of isolated, mineral, cadastral, hydrographic, geographic information system, remote sensing, nagyan po sa remote sensing, photogrammetric surveys, and map projections. So as you can see, si cartography, geodesy, og si theory and practice, maurag scope sa exam, na mga topics sa geodesy na masaag sa theory and practice, and na po yung cartography na masaag sa geodesy, and vice versa.